I think for a lot of people, it makes sense, and it's probably even appropriate to some degree to start out with those really cheap deals that do have a high ROI, because it's, there's not as much risk. You can kind of cut your teeth on something where the stakes aren't as high. But I'm curious, like, at what point did you realize and start consciously pursuing deals that were bigger in dollar amount, but the ROI maybe wasn't that large? And how'd you figure out, okay, this is the profile I want to go after? Was there any way that you got comfortable with, I don't know, the perceived risk, or just the bigger numbers that might seem kind of scary to most people?
The thing was, I started out with $4,500 to play with. I was basically like, okay, I can lose this and the world won't end, but that's all I've got to play with. So, you can't do massive takedown deals when you're working with that little amount. So for us, it was all about, like you said, one small deal at a time, and then plowing the profits back in. And it was flip, flip, flip. And for me, I was kind of like, I wanted a systematic, repeatable approach. So as soon as I had that figured out, you're banging out 50 to 70 transactions a year the first couple of years. But then when you start doing the math, you go, yeah, this is a good second income. But we hit that about, I think we did 70 transactions one year, my wife and I. She works the business with me. And it was like, okay, this is the stress point, the stress test. If I want to make more, I'm going to have to do more transactions. And it was just too high touch. At the time we were doing self-closings with everything, and
That's a lot.
and listing everything ourselves, and like a lot of people do, getting started. But we were also trying to build up our own, war chest of funds. So I think we were limited by capital really a lot. So that, using our own money took us a while. So probably the first 2.5 years, we stayed focused on sub $10,000 properties. And every once in a while, a bigger one would sneak in there, but I wasn't targeting those properties. But yeah, after we had, it kind of pushed I think the key here is that I didn't quit my job. A week after this started working, or I did my first deal, I really looked at it like, hey, there's got to be a lot of overlap here. I want a lot of overlap, and I want to be able to plow all the profits back into the business to do bigger deals and more deals. And like you said, when we finally got to that point, we also started to leverage other people's money and get a capital partner, because I really felt limited with what I could target or mail, because it was like, hey, first I'd heard, this only works with the cheaper properties. That's why it works, is because these individuals can't use realtors. No realtor wants to take that listing. There's not enough commission. So in my mind, based on all the podcasts and courses I had heard, this business model only worked because it was an inefficient market with these sub 20,000, sub 10,000 properties. Then I start, just the pain of self-closing and listing and talking to buyer leads. I was just like, I can't do this, and it came in a good time. I listed this 80-20 rule, 80-20 principle book, which I know you guys are both familiar with and fans of, but and I said, how can I apply this to our land investing, company? And so for 3 months, I used a time tracking app, and I really tagged every activity, like sending mail, pulling lists, talking to buyer leads, self-closing buy side, self-closing sell side. Anyway, so we went through and I looked at where all my time was spent, and I also looked at what I don't like to do. And I found a lot of our time was spent on self-closing on the both sides of the transaction, the buy and the sell, and then creating listings and talking to buyer leads. So we decided, okay, let's 80-20 our land business. So that's where we decided to move to a model where we used realtors and we used title companies on each side. And we could only do that by moving up, like you said, to the higher value property. You can't do that with the lower properties because there's not enough meat on the bone, So we moved up, and we started using some funding, started using some other people's money paired with our own. And let's say it worked, right? By that point, I had enough transactions under my belt. I knew the transaction life cycle. So there's not much work in a bigger deal than there is in a smaller deal. Maybe less, right, Jaron? Since you're using, realtors and title companies, maybe less, more risk with your own money, but there's not much work. So for us, it took us a couple of years because we needed to build up our own money. But we were also focused on seller financing. So most of our net worth, what was tied up in note portfolio, which wasn't liquid, So we used some capital funding and started going after bigger properties and leveraging realtors and title companies. And that's where I feel like for me, our business, took a turn. And I think it's also when we started enjoying the business more. When you're servicing, there's one point where we were self-servicing over 100 notes, and then listing all our own properties. And yes, we were making money, but it wasn't fun. You know what I mean? It wasn't fun anymore. It was a lot of, death by 1,000 paper cuts, I call it. I mean, it was just painful. So moving to the bigger stuff really kind of re-energized me about the business model and also proved out that this can be done at a higher price point.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but I will say going up in price point is a huge 80-20 leverage point. Because even if we talk about the bell curve of competition, like you could be in the most competitive county in the most competitive state, and if you do north of 25 grand, all of a sudden you're the sandbox you're playing in is a lot quieter. Like it's just sure there's other investors and stuff that you'll run into, but it's not like that kind of south of 15 grand acquisition price, especially between kind of that like 5,000 to, sub 5,000 acquisition price. There's a lot of activity there. So there's that alone is one of the reasons why I'm a big proponent of it. If you can afford it, all things being equal, you just get a lot more done with less effort.